Joe, of course, you're originally from Maine. You now live in the mountains of western Colorado. I think a lot of people will remember you as co-host of the Joe and Andy Family on WROR. Do you miss getting up early doing radio, Joe?
I still get up early.
Oh, that's right. You did today, didn't you?
Well, no, well, yeah, in a way. I miss being. I'll tell you what I miss. I miss the interaction with a listener, Mike. That's what I really miss.
Yeah.
I end up. My wife, I drive her crazy. She said, honey, you don't have to do a radio show exclusively for me every morning, okay?
Yeah.
I'm telling you the news. I'm reading the headlines. And I'll go talk to the animals. All right?
Well, I just hope that she gives you good rating points.
Yeah, she does, as a matter of fact.
So how did you become friends with Robert Urich? I mean, you wrote his life story, so you must have had a special relationship.
Well, it's really funny how it happened. We were on the air, as you kindly pointed out, doing Joe and Andy, and Bobby McGinnis was a big listener to our show, nice guy. He was a Teamster, and he drove Bob to different locations for Spencer for Hire, because they filmed all over Boston, as you probably remember, and tying up traffic and driving people crazy. But anyway, so he was driving into work to a set, to a location one day, and had the radio on. Bobby had the radio on. He said, "Who's these guys?" And Bobby said, "Joe and Andy." He said, "Who?" He goes, "Joe and Andy." He said, "They're crazy." He said, "Yeah, I want to meet them." So a couple of days later, he brought him down to the station, and the doors of the studio opened, and in came this huge guy. I mean, he's over 6'2", and a big presence, as you probably know about Bob. I mean, he took command of any room, especially a small radio studio. So he came over to me and he said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I said, "I know you're an actor." And he said, and he leaned in my face, Mike. He was only like about a foot and a half away, and he goes, "I did a little show called Vegas."
Oh.
And I said, "Bob," I said, I never watched it. I said, "I'm a radio guy. I'm in bed at 9 o'clock at night." Now, this is back in '85, before DVDs and DVRs and all that stuff.
Right.
And he leaned even closer to me, and we were shaking hands, Mike, and I thought he was going to break my hand with his grip. And he said, "My wife Heather and I never watched it either." And he started laughing. And he gave me a big bear hug, and I think he was impressed that I wasn't trying to kiss up to the big name celebrity in town, and we just hit it off. We went to Celtic games. We hung out together. I lived in Boxford up on the North Shore, and he lived in Andover. And we just hung out together.
That's cool. So I'm glad you mentioned Vegas. Wasn't there an incident where he crashed his famous T-Bird on the set?
He talked to Duke Vincent, the producer, who I got to know pretty well writing the book, and he went up to... Bob was a big kid. I think that's another reason why we got along, because I'm a big kid too. And he always wanted to pull something off, and he said, I'm gonna stage a scene where I'm going to crash into the set. And Duke said, "No, don't be doing this, okay? You're going to hold up production. You're going to get hurt." He said, "Please, Bob, don't do it." Well, Bob, being Bob, he did it anyway. Well, what happened, Mike, he lost control. He gave it a little bit too much gas, and he went into the set a little bit harder than he thought, banged his head, fell out on the floor.
Oh, no.
So everybody stopped production, ran over. Duke goes, "Call EMTs, call an ambulance. Get the hospital on the phone. We got to send Bob right over." And as soon as he leaned into Bob's face, Bob started laughing. He goes, "You son of a gun." He said, "You're not hurt." He said, "Get up." He said, "You ruined the set." He said, "But we got another shot to do. Get up." So, but he was always pulling stuff like that off.
Well, I hope they actually were able to use some of that in another episode.
Yeah, they did.
That's Joe Martelle. He wrote the book Robert Urich, An Extraordinary Life, which is available right now. We'll tell you how to get it shortly. All right, so you find out so many interesting things from a book like yours, Joe. For instance, Brian Dennehy and Ed O'Neill were possible actors in the lead role of Spencer for Hire, but of course, it's hard for me to imagine Al Bundy playing the part of Spencer that Robert Urich got.
John Wilder was the producer the first season on Spencer, and I asked him, I said, about the casting. In fact, I go into quite detail. Thanks to John, he gave me a lot of info in the book about the cast. Originally, they wanted a Robert Mitchum type, but they figured that Dennehy was a little bit too old. And John wasn't really sold on Robert Urich, by the way. He met Bob, and after he met him, he said, gee, he was so gregarious and such a personable type of guy. I knew right then and there he was my Spencer. You know who they wanted for Hawk, though? They wanted Marvin Hagler.
Oh, the boxer.
Yeah, they
right.
wanted Marvin Hagler, but he wasn't available. Marvin wanted to get into acting, but he had some commitments, so he had to pass on it, and along came Avery Brooks, and Avery Brooks became Hawk.
Yeah, Avery Brooks had a bit of an ego, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Matter of fact, later on, when they did the spin-off of Spencer, when Spencer was canceled after 3 years, they did a series called Hawk. And Bob called up Avery and said, would you like me to do a guest shot for you? And he said, quote, unquote. And I haven't been able to verify this, but I'll give you this. This came from Bob's older brother, Tom. I don't need anybody helping me, especially you.
Oh, man.
And I thought, whoa. I sent Avery a couple of letters and a couple of emails because I really wanted a couple of quotes from him, and I wanted to ask him about that, but he never responded. And I was quite disappointed because, you know, the chemistry between Avery Brooks and Bob Urich made Spencer for Hire, I believe.
Sure. Well, kind of the chemistry we have, but you hate my guts, so you know we're not going to worry about that. So
no way, man.
Let's. You know, you wrote a lot about Bob's wife, Heather, who he was
Yes.
so committed to.
Yes.
Tell us the story of their unlikely meeting at an audition, and she had no interest in him.
Yeah, they were doing a commercial for Libby's on the table.
Right.
And listen to this. This is the type of person Bob was. What a character. He was like fifth in line behind Heather. He spotted Heather and he went, So he said to the guys in front of him, he said, look, I have another casting call to make. Can I move up a little bit? Would you guys mind? And they were all reading the script for the commercial, and they said, no, go ahead. You know, not realizing that he'd be right behind Heather. Well, Heather could care less. As a matter of fact, she said, I didn't need another chiseled-chinned actor in my life. She had been married before, and she wanted nothing to do with the acting business. And they pulled it off, but she got out of there as fast as she could. And she ran out to the parking lot. She had a little Volkswagen at the time, and she started to get in, and she felt this hand on the door handle holding it closed, and it was Bob. And she said he was totally different. He had glasses on, and he was really soft-spoken. He wasn't that outspoken guy that he was at the audition, and he wouldn't let her go until she decided to go on a date with him. And I guess the first date was a real bomb-hole. He talked too much. She didn't talk enough. And he said, well, that's that. I'll never see her again. But as you know, things worked out, and they ended up being happily married forever. She never got over losing him, Mike. Every time I talked to her on the phone to get some more information for the book, the subject always came around to how much she missed Bob. And for 15 years, that woman just carried that torch for him like you wouldn't believe.
Earlier, you mentioned the Teamsters, and from what I read in your book, they would do anything for Bob, who was, you know, but he was strong-armed into doing the Southeast St. Patty's Day Parade, wasn't he, one year?
The Teamsters, they said, you got to be in the St. Patrick's Day Parade, Bob. And they used to call him Rabbit. You know, they couldn't pronounce Robert, so they'd come out Rabbit, you know, with that New England accent.
Right.
And Bob said, no, I don't think I want to do it. And he said, Rabbit, you don't understand. We're not just asking you, we're telling you. So anyway, so he ends up being the Grand Marshal in the parade in this beautiful, beautiful Mercedes. And at the end of the parade, and have you ever seen the St. Patrick's Day Parade in Southie?
Only from a distance.
Well, you're probably smart because a lot of things happen.
I didn't see it this year.
Once, and I thought, oh my God, they're throwing rocks from the porches of the double-deckers, the duplexes, at the Marine Corps Band. If they're throwing rocks at the Marine Corps Band, what are they going to see when they see Joe and Andy at WROI? Well, thankfully, we made it through. But back to Bob, at the end of the parade, they came up to him and they said, okay, get out of the car, Robert. And Bob said, well, okay, what's the rush? We got to get the car back down to the dock. It was a hot vehicle that he'd been riding in the St. Patrick's Day Parade. And Bob said, Joe, I'm not kidding you. He said, I couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Oh, man. I wish we had more time, but I did notice one thing, and you'll be too modest probably to bring it up yourself, but after season 1, I think ABC was going to cancel Spencer for Hire, and you and your partner, Andy, got a lot of action going on petitions and a lot of momentum, and ABC was listening to you.
Yes, we. As a matter of fact, Robert Murphy, gee, I can't believe you brought this up, was the CEO at ABC at the time, and we sent him thousands of signatures and letters, and he flew into Boston and did our show. And he said, you know what? We're going to renew it. He liked the show, actually. He said, he said, Bob shows may get canceled. He said, but he's money in the bank for us. People love him. They don't necessarily like a lot of the shows he's on, but they love him, and he's money in the bank for ABC. And not only did it get renewed for a second season, but as you know, Mike, a third season. Can I say hi to one of your listeners, by the way?
Of course, Joe.
I got an email from Georgia in Nashua who loves you, Mike.
Oh.
So, hi, Georgia. They can support you. They can really make you, or as they say, break you.
Robert Urich, An Extraordinary Life, all about, of course, Spencer for Hire and Dan Tana on Vegas movies, and there's so much more. It's a well-done book, and believe me, you are going to know more about Robert Urich than he probably knew about himself when he was alive. Joe Martelle, formerly of the Joe and Andy family on WROR, living out in Colorado now. We could go on and on because we're both talkers, but I think we better stop now before your friend in Nashua shuts off the radio.
Thanks a lot, Mike. It was fun.
Thank you, man.